Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul. I'm a software engineer here in the desktop team, and I'm blind, as you probably could have guessed. It's super great not to see you all here today, and I'm going to talk to you about how your UI is actually just an API. And that might sound a little bit weird, but hopefully that'll kind of get across to you here now in a minute. All right, hopefully that worked. If it didn't, well, I don't know what to tell you. So here we have a screenshot of a dashboard, and some of you may be familiar with the dashboard, but the dashboard's not the point. It's just an example. Don't take it personally, or do, up to you. So when you see a UI, obviously somebody didn't draw that UI. That's made by putting HTML nodes on the page, or whatever framework you're using. That doesn't really matter. But when you're creating a UI, actually, you're essentially just sending data like it's an API. And to kind of talk about that a bit more, so on this screenshot, you can see the header where it has one model, right? So if we go to the next page, this is the accessibility tree in the Chrome DevTools. And each essentially thing that you create becomes a node, right? Which is then read to a screen reader. If you don't know what a screen reader is, it just basically reads out what's on the page, as the name kind of implies. But that page, actually, the way that the nodes have been added, the number one, a space, and the word model are all separate nodes. So what that means, actually, is I would have to press the down arrow 3 times to read 2 words, which is obviously not great, but it is a good way of increasing engagement metrics, I suppose. OK, so something that a lot of people would think would be very easy for me to read is a terminal, right? And that makes sense, because it's just text-based, right? And you hear a lot of back-end devs say how they're so glad they don't have to write CSS and how that's so great, and they do such a great job. But I have some really good news for them. They've invented something far worse. So, I mean, as that kind of illustrates, plus dash, 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 dash isn't particularly readable, especially when you're having to listen to that. And obviously, each terminal is a bit different, but I think you get the point that it is literally a nightmare when you have to read all of that. OK, and another thing is that it actually does matter what order you have your, I guess, sort of responses from your API, if you will, in. Because no matter how you visually position them, which a common thing is to position error messages or toasts at the top or the bottom of the screen, and you might have the actual element itself somewhere random on the screen. It might be all the way down the bottom of the page. And what that means, actually, is if I'm using a screen reader, I actually have to go to the very bottom of the page to even realize that it exists. So actually using positioning to kind of reposition things is not really a solution to having your, essentially, data in the wrong place. And a little bit more on that. So when you are literally creating an element, you are literally sending an API request, essentially, right? And each attribute or property of that element is kind of like its own piece of data from the API. So if you're returning a label, for example, which my screen reader reads if, for example, you have an icon, and that's null, I mean, that's obviously a bad API request, and I would hope that nobody here would ship something that would return null in production. So I don't know why we think it's OK to do it when it's a UI. So really important question, what does your UI look like in the dark or when you can't actually see it? And as I said, the best kind of way that I've found to think of it recently is kind of like you're building an API, and you would want to return data for all of your different endpoints. You wouldn't want some of them to work and some of them not to work. It's like having a REST API that works great, but then your graph SQL one does not work properly at all. And obviously, that would not be OK at all. If you want to learn more about accessibility, feel free to check out any of the resources. There's actually some in the library under Engineering Excellence. You can scan the QR code, or you can join the Accessibility Guild. Thank you so much, everybody.